All right, the next presentation for this week, what I wanted to go over was, okay, so we've understand strategic learning. Okay. Now, what's IT's role in all of this? How do we actually start that whole planning process? So we'll go ahead and kick this off here. Um, what's our role in enterprise strategy? So now we know how to learn strategically. Um, Now it's okay to do a little bit. So I spent the whole presentation back there saying, no, we don't do strategic planning anymore. We do strategic learning. Okay, now we've done the learning. It's time to actually do the planning. So let's do it right. Understand, again, I keep coming back to this. We have a role in this organization. There's a CIO, there's a business strategy, there's product operations, marketing, sales, all these. IT has a strategy as well, and that has to be something that's moving the overall business forward. And out of that, we might have applications strategy or social media strategy, network strategy. But basically, the understanding information and the technology that we deploy has to have a strategy as well. The purpose of this plan is going to be to manage this critical and expensive asset that is our information service architecture. Okay, how do we maximize the benefit from it? And what are the expectations can be placed on it? So now that we know what we need to do from our learning by the environment, what we need to go do, how do we actually make that happen? How do we link our IS to the business direction and plan for the flow of all this information and processes? And allocate all the IS resources to do that most effectively to give us that competitive advantage. So as we talked about in the prior presentation, there are types of planning out there for how we're going to execute to this particular project we need to put in. That's not what we're talking about. We're talking about the strategic plan here. What is between this year, the out year, the next year? What are we going to do to win this war? Get the customer involvement, determine the budget level kinds of things. And that's really the difference. So if you think about it on those questions on the right, those are the difference between a tactical plan and a strategic plan. A strategic plan is going to say, over the next so many years, this is how much budget I'm going to need. Okay, tactically means here's your budget. Now go. How are you going to execute to that? It's a different kind of thing, and they're looking at different kinds of projects. This is what we're looking at: strategic planning, and understanding also the expense and associated with making good strategic decisions up front. We put this in as a defense world example. I actually pulled this chart from something that showed the cost of um, making good strategic decisions early on in a project. When you don't spend the time to get your requirements right up front, you wind up that area under the curve winds up being a lot larger and you wind up spending a lot more money. For a business, that means we're going to be allocating more resources than we need to, but more likely it just means we're going to miss those windows for competitive advantage against our competitors. So we have to think through the planning process and do it well. Major phases in strategic thinking. What's the business going to go do? We should know that. Where are we now in terms of our IT? What's the where do we want to be? And then out of that, what's the gap? And then how are we going to bridge that gap? So understanding the plan is going to be key. You have to do a situational awareness, a situational analysis rather, and do a strategy formulation. And that's going to be your gap analysis, right? Between those two. And then how are we going to implement that strategy? 4 phases of this. Visioning, setting up the project, how is it going to operate? What's the business, how it's going to look like to support the business? Doing the analysis that says, all right, so then what IT systems and processes do we need to have to operate this? Getting the direction together that says, what's the IS plan and vision? Where do you want IS to be? And what do we need to be doing? And then doing the detailed IS recommendation. This presentation, we're going to focus on the first part of this, okay? And really get into the sort of the detailed execution in the next one. So look at our business strategies: operational excellence, customer intimacy, or product leadership. Business is typically going to have one of those that they really focus on, sometimes two, but mostly this. So think about product leadership. You could say that Apple and its product line is a leader. You could also say their customer intimacy. There's a huge platform that gets built around there. They're not really focused on operational excellence, although they do a good job of it. But their real winning strategy is that customer intimacy and product leadership. Walmart is all about operational excellence. They can get what the customer wants better than anyone else. So think about what that strategy is and how we need to align our IS resources to support that. So then we understand and document the strategy of the business. We start to lay out how IT as a part of that business is going to be a necessary element for success. So we need to align the input, business plan and vision, business information, any history about the business, and the requirements and the operating vision of how they see themselves executing with what we're going to do with IS. That starts with the mission. Why are we here? Why does the business exist? It's here to do something, right? What does the see itself becoming? So in our strategic learning, what did we learn about the customer set? What's changing around us that we have to go do? Make sure you get a good vision statement that's credible and concise, because that's going to be feeding what we need to do from an IS perspective. Then we have out of there strategies, right? So out of our learning, what did we decide were going to be the strategies? What's our winning proposition that we're going in? What are we most worried about? And how does that translate into the actual goals of the organization? And if you haven't done that process, but you're coming in, it's a really useful exercise to look at what people's goals are in executive areas. What are they really focused on? What do they spend their time on? Because a lot of times that will tell you what the actual heart and soul of the business is and what they're trying to do. We need to go through and understand the basic business information. What's the history of the company? What markets do we compete in? Are we global? Are we more of a local organization? And then what are the basic product lines and overall performance of the company? How well do we do? What are our growth rates? Do we have good lead times for our suppliers? Do we have good lead times for sales? And then any other statistics relevant to cost of goods sold, inventory turnover, growth in employees, all that kind of things. Then you look at the industry itself. How large is our industry? What are the trends in the industry, and how do we marry up with those? Is it a commodity industry? Is it a product-based industry? Is it a customer-driven industry? What potential changes are out there to differentiate us? All of this should have gone into our winning proposition, but make sure from an IS perspective, we understand really what got us to that winning proposition. And so by nature of that, how can we best support what the changes need to be? And then understand the external environment. What stakeholders do we have to be looking out for? A lot of this will translate into not only how we develop the social media campaign, how we develop the social media technology that we need to implement, but also cyber protection. It'll also translate into the regulatory environment that we need to do, and understand what threats are out there as well. What do we need to be thinking about that might be a threat to our customer primacy that we need to be thinking about that IT can help go address. So then we look internally, right? Internally, okay, now that we understand what we need to do externally, now we understand what the industry is doing, how do we respond to that? So what are we actually doing well? And you can get that from external surveys and you can get from internal surveys. But you want to understand a good understanding of how we marry up to our ability to meet that overall strategy that we're laying out. And summarize all this, right? Create a summary of the business drivers that you've been able to gather in relation to the IT and IS particular elements. Sometimes it may be a production issue or something else, and not necessarily an IS issue, but if it's something that we think it's going to be particularly relevant to us to need to address, then we should lay it in here. And sometimes there'll be opportunities where we can help, in some particular areas. I put United Van Lines in here. I think we'll talk about that a little bit in the business case. But there's sometimes areas where IS can really go in and make a big difference. So let's identify those and put those in there. Report all this summary back to the executive so we get confirmation that not only do we understand the strategic competitive position of the business, but we understand where IT's role in that is today, right? And how we can potentially move that in the future. We want to make sure there's that connectivity. And part of this goes back to if we can summarize back to leadership, IT's role and IT's understanding of our role in this, that helps to make us part of the solution. So they will use and pull IT and information, the ability to manage IT into the overall competitive picture. If they understand that we're, as a teammate, we're part of this organization. A lot of times this is you don't need to do that because the company knows the value of information services. But if you happen to be going into a company where IT is a cost center, this is a very relevant and important step. Okay, that's why I'm kind of foot stomping this. You've got to be able to make sure everyone knows that IT sees and understands the competitive environment, sees and understands our industry, sees and understands our position, and is ready to make changes and drive the organization as a total forward to become more competitive.